Why does this keep happening again and again?
Well, if you think about it, other than the Weather Service and Amber Alerts, very few emergency managers ever utilize the system. They're using all these other systems to do event notifications, but they're not using the emergency alert system. So one, they're not familiar with it, they're not used to doing it. They have these other systems, and to a certain degree, I think they're confusing systems that are designed for what I would call emergencies, but aren't really designed for large mass notifications and disasters. So one, they don't use it, they don't practice using it, and they have all these other tools they're using every day. And in a crisis, we know that you're going to default to the things you're most comfortable with, and they're not comfortable with that. So I think that's the first problem we have. The second thing is we almost invariably look at this as a technology issue, a problem with the hardware, a problem with the system. And what we have seen is that's not been the issue. It's been the failure to activate the system, or a decision not to activate the system.
The software, the brain, the human emotion, push the button. The technology is there. It's not being utilized.
Yeah, and again, the technology itself has its own challenges, but that's not been the failure in these events. And to a certain degree, I think people don't understand the technology they're using. Again, I know there's a heavy dependence, and every day we use our cell phones, we use streaming, and it's considered like this really great service until you have something like you had wildfires in California where 200 cell sites went down in the fire. Or you've got hurricanes like Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Ian, that took out cellular communication, and now none of those systems are working because they're dependent upon going over those circuits, and they're down. But the wireless emergency alerts are backed up on PBS stations. They'll go out there. We have the emergency broadcast system, so we have the transmissions coming off of the towers. The radio and the TVs are actually broadcasting that. It goes over the satellite systems. So when you're activating this, you're going through a lot more redundant technologies that don't have as many single points of failure. But again, I did an exercise in Florida West County this past week. Was 2 weeks ago. And in the scenario, I did a chemical spill. And I had an incident command, fire, and they made the decision they needed to do shelter in place. They passed that and said, we need to activate the emergency alert system. The county, they said, okay, we did it. I said, no, I want you to show me the steps. And they're going, well, we got to go get the manual. I'm like, guys, you got minutes to communicate this. They're already telling you this train derailment. We've got chemicals and we need to get people to shelter in place. It's morning. You need to get through to people quickly. You're now telling me we have to pull the binder off the shelf. And the other thing I find is because there's this concern that we're going to make a mistake or somebody's unauthorized, we make it so hard to get to the person that can actually activate the system that on a Sunday morning at 3 a.m., the person that needs to activate it may not be even nearby, or somebody they're going to have to go track and run down just to say, okay, you can activate the system. Which, again, if I'm doing a hurricane, I got time for that. If I'm dealing with tornadoes, I'm dealing with chemical releases where I need people to take immediate action. Every minute I add to that is less time for people to be able to protect themselves.
You were director of FEMA. Is enough attention being paid to actually pushing the button, to practicing this?
You know, when I was at FEMA, we were so worried about just getting the system to work technology. If you remember, when I was in FEMA, we did our first national test. Yep. And when we did the test, we found a lot of things didn't work as advertised. And we got a lot of criticism. We said, you do understand we have built a very complex system that had never been tested. It was never stress tested. This is the first time we did it. We anticipated there would be challenges, and we were able to address it. We did a recent test, and it was like across the nation. And what the most interesting thing was with the cellular providers, who got their notifications first. Mm-hmm. But it worked. And now we're seeing, well, it works, but we're not using it. Think about it. The average person gets notifications from the Weather Service and Amber Alerts. Those are routine things. Law enforcement is very good to the sense of getting out an Amber Alert. But most emergency managers, if you go to a local office or you talk to a local emergency manager and you ask them that process and you go, walk me through it.
Pushing the button.
Pushing the button. I think there's a big gap between, yeah, we know the system's there, we got a manual, but we've never done it. And so one of the things I think we probably need to go back to do, we did this in the beginning, it's even before I got to FEMA, but I think it's something we should be doing it more, is building simulators where we can have the emergency managers go in there and actually touch the equipment they're going to use, send a message that's contained, just to get past that, what I call mic fright of I'm scared of pressing the button.
Does there need to be a national standard? Do we need to pay more attention to this nationally?
I think we need to pay more attention to it. I think we really need to get down to making sure that we are proficient at the local originate. And this really goes back to the alert originator. So state plans are different. Some states have different ways of determining who that alert originator is. I think what we want to make sure is every alert originator is proficient in the mechanics of the system, but we've also helped them develop and craft the messaging so they're effective. And then we need to go back and test that. Right now, if you think about it, the only thing we test in the emergency alert system is the actual hardware. We never test whether or not local authorities, the alert originators, are proficient and able to activate the system.
Or have ever tried to activate?
Or ever tried that. So I think, again, knowing where we are in the evolution of this, I think we're at the point where we ought to be looking at not just our monthly test to make sure the hardware is working at that end. We need, because that's really only testing the broadcasters. It's not really testing any of the originators. It's just usually state EOC does it. And we've even seen problems with that. So getting that down to the local level and then coming up with a way to go, how do we determine proficiency in the mechanics of activating the system? And two, making sure they have clear rules of engagement of when they should be doing it, and that it's okay to use this, and it's okay that if you think you should use it, because the worst thing that's going to happen is, you overwarn. The scenario that scares everybody is when you don't do it, and we end up with loss of life because people didn't get any information.